What is going on, everybody? Welcome to part 16 of our practical Flask tutorial series. In this video, what we're going to be doing is actually adding our registration form to our register page function here. In the last video, I did say that we were probably going to have a full registration process done in this video. Unlikely. Sorry, I lied. We've got to cover this, adding it to our HTML page, and password hashing all before we can actually do this. So it's going to take a while. But anyways, let's jump in and see how far we can get. So to our register page, let me go ahead and make the font bigger, because I made it small so I could read everything real quick before. But now we're ready to continue along. So we've got all this so far, and then we'll come down here. We'll leave the try and accept. We'll leave the connection. Actually, let's get rid of the connection. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So first we want to try. And the first thing we're going to say is form equals registration form, and then in parentheses request.form. Okay, so that's just giving us this form that we're going to inject into our page here in a minute. So when we return the render template, we're going to pass through this form variable into our HTML page, and then we can actually render the form based on the information contained in our form variable. So we'll still be passing it through, but we won't actually be building the form as we normally would have to. But you'll see what I mean in a minute. Well, in a few minutes. Okay, so form equals that. Now, if request.method equals all caps post and form.validate. So what this is asking is, first of all, if the method is a post, i.e. they hit register, the register button, so they're making an attempt to make a registration, and the form has been validated, i.e. we have two passwords filled in, they match, they have a username field, all that kind of stuff. Okay, right? They have to have a minimum of 4, a maximum of 20. So this also, not only does that mean that the minimum is 4, the maximum is 20, it also means you have to have something in that field. Same thing with the email. Password, it's required. Confirm is also required to match password. So by the transitive property, both of these are required, and then this is also required. So if request.method equals post and the form is validated, we're ready to continue along. So first we're going to say their username, so the attempted username is going to be equal to what? Well, it's going to be equal to form.username.data. So form is in reference up here, well, it's reference to this, which is in reference to this class. So form.username is this right here, and then text field returns some information, and .data is going to be the data that the user put in. So .data will be whatever they fill into this username variable. Okay, so that's username. And then email is going to be form.email.data. And then we have down here password. Now, at no point, besides when you just right when you collect that password, they're going to have to send a password over, but immediately before you start playing with any passwords, using them or whatever, your immediate reaction needs to be to encrypt that password. So password is going to be equal to well, we don't have it just yet, but we'll have to grab that real quick. But SHA-256 underscore crypt dot encrypt. And then we want to encrypt the basically altogether the string version of form.password.data. So first we need SHA-256 crypt, and then we're also going to need really probably one more thing, but we'll get there. So first let's go ahead and get SHA-256 crypt. So let me go here. So back to our console here. So let's do pip install SHA-256 underscore crypt. Actually, you know what? Hold on. Let me go. Yeah, well, actually, what we need is passlib. Pip install passlib. Okay, so we have passlib. Now what we want to do is go to the top of our init script here, and we're going to go from passlib.hash import SHA-256 underscore crypt. So this is a big, it's passlib, which is a library for handling passwords. You hash passwords, and we're going to hash them with SHA-256. Also, while we're up in our imports, we're going to import one more thing, and that's going to be from MySQL DB. Import escape underscore string underscore, escape string as, and we're going to call it thwart. And the reason why we're importing this and calling it thwart is escape string is going to escape any sort of SQL injection type stuff. So generally an SQL exception is going to start with, say, I can't speak, like an apostrophe basically. And then they might do some stuff, and then they're going to start injecting SQL queries. So the way SQL injection works, just for really quick, is when we actually run, let's say, an insert query, you can run the insert query, and then you could append more queries to the end, like if you, the programmer, could do it that way. So what people do when they do SQL injection is they're going to say, my username equals something seemingly legitimate, and then they're going to close off the SQL query, and then they're going to add an SQL query literally within the username field or the password field or the email field. So you don't want people being able to do that. So to get around that, we can use escape string. Now that's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty good. So we do that, and we also obviously need to hash the passwords. So we've got those, and now we're ready. Hold on, my mouse is super sensitive. Anyway, so we have that. Now we're ready to go back to our register page. So coming on down, the password equals this. Now I'm going to show you guys just what this does. This is actually really cool. Even if you don't really understand encryption that much, this should be very impressive. So probably in the next video I'll show that. I'm just hoping to get through this register page, but we'll see. Anyway, C and then con equals connection, which is what we imported above from DB Connect import connection. Now we're going to actually execute a query. So we're going to say X for execute. You actually don't have to assign anything to variables, especially if you're just executing an insert. The only thing you would have to assign to a variable is, say, a select query or something that would actually return something. But I like to assign it to variables anyway. So C.execute. So this is cursor.execute. Now we're going to execute a SQL query. And what we want to do is select all, I guess I actually misspoke there. So we are actually selecting, and what we're actually going to do here is we're checking the database to see if the username already exists. Otherwise, you might wind up with users with the same username, right? You can't have that. So select all from users. So select everything from the table of users. Asterisk means all. Where username equals, and then we have some logic here, or some variable basically, and what this is just doing is where it equals some variable, and then we do comma, and then you put the variables in order of your %s's. So you'll see that later on you might have where username equals %s and, I don't know, email equals %s, so you would put them in username email order in these parentheses. And also, if you want to learn more about, again, SQL queries, I do have some MySQL tutorials with Python, but you should learn quite a few here. Anyway, and then, again, we want to thwart. Remember, we imported this escape string as thwart because we're thwarting jerks. So thwart, and then what are we trying to thwart? Well, we're thwarting the username. Let me make sure I did that right. Yeah, okay. And then so just make sure that all clears out. Then we're going to have an if statement. If int x is greater than 0, we're going to say, we're going to flash, and if int x, if int, hold on. That doesn't make any sense. We'll have to check that in a second. That's what my code actually says, but that's not quite what we want actually. You would want it, I believe, the length of x. Well, We'll have to check that out when I get through. That's a pretty silly error if that's the case. But if that's the case, we're going to flash that username is already taken. Please choose another. X equals select all. I just find it really hard to believe if the int of len of x. I'm just not even going to go with that. That must be just a typo or something. Anyway, that username is already taken. Please try another. And then we will return render underscore template register.html and form equals form. And we still need to make that register.html template as well. So that's if this is greater than 0. So basically if the length of rows, because X is going to execute the select query, and then the select query basically is going to return in order of, or basically rows, right? Each row of data. So if the length of those rows is greater than 0, that means there's already that username in existence. So that user can't have that username. Else, we actually want to run an execution. So else we would say c.execute, and we will insert into users, and then here we put the columns, so username, password, email, and tracking. So you insert into users, and then these are the columns that we're going to insert and in the order that we will be inserting stuff. So insert into users that information, and then we're going to now have values, and that's going to be what are we inserting, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 things, so that's %s, comma, %s, comma, %s, comma, and one more %s. And then that's basically the end of the query, but now we throw in our actual variables here, and the variables again is going to be a tuple for long in the order of username, password, email, and tracking. So what do we need to actually thwart again? Well, that's anything the user inputs. So username, password, and email, those three need to be thwarted. Okay, so we're going to have, the first one will be thwart username, comma, thwart password, comma, thwart email, comma, and then the tracking will just be our version of tracking, but just in case we're stupid for some reason and we have tracking that actually corresponds to some sort of injection by mistake, we'll thwart that as well. You might as well. And for now, the first bit of tracking that we throw in here is actually going to be introduction to Python programming. So again, tracking is what are the topics the user has viewed. So in our case, as soon as someone registers, this is the page that we're going to send them to. So we're going to go ahead and say that they've done that tutorial. So this page is like a landing page that just kind of explains how Python programming.net works, and it's a basic introduction to Python as well. So that's this page here. So this would be the landing page that they're sent to on my site. So it's got some information here, some stuff on console, how this page is working. We've even got a little embedded console here. What does Python do? What is a wrapper? We check this stuff. Anyway, it's a nice little introduction page. So moving along. So that's what we want to insert with our query, and that's our whole query there. And then anytime you are doing inserting into a database, it's kind of like modifying a file, right? When you have a text file, you might write in that text file, but if you write in that text file and you pull the power plug to your computer, is that text saved? No. If you're using maybe Google Drive or something, it is, but is that text generally saved? No. And it's the same thing with database. You insert into that database, but until you do the following, con.commit, it will not save to that database. You'll actually have kind of like a little temporary kind of thing there, and it won't actually save. Once we've committed, we're gonna flash, and the message that will flash to the user is just gonna be, thanks for registering. Okay, easy enough. Now the other thing that you'll want to do is c.close, and then so that closes your cursor. Then we're gonna run a con.close. And the idea here is that you're going to close your connection because SQL or just database connections in general are going to take memory. Now, we're going to have one more thing which we actually have not imported, and that is GC. And GC stands for garbage collector, and then .collect. Now, sadly, you've probably never needed this code in your life. You've probably never seen it, thought about it, or anything. Python is pretty darn good at garbage collection, and by garbage collection we mean clearing out unused cached memory for the most part. But for whatever reason, when we make a web server with Python and Flask, it suddenly does not just collect its garbage. Okay, so I use gc.collect, and that kind of helps us keep a rein in on the memory usage, or the memory waste, basically. So now we need to go up to the very, very top and just import GC. Okay, and that's just, again, garbage collector. It's Python, and for whatever reason it's useful. I find that it's the connections to the database that cause the trouble, so every time I have a connection to a database, right after closing, I do gc.collect. Maybe it's not the best way, the most elite way ever, but it works, so that's what I'll teach. So anyway, we've done that. Now we have a couple more things that we want to add. I forgot about session. So we come to the very, very top now. Let's go up. From Flask, import all this. So we're going to import one more thing, and that's going to be session. And what this is it's a good way to track your user's session via cookies. The other thing that you can have is G. I don't really tend to use G, but G has a lot of fancy stuff. Definitely look into it. I tend to do everything via just using session, but G is pretty good. It's good for tracking what your user is doing. So anyway, coming back down to our function here, gc.collect. After we've collected, we want to do session, and session is basically a dictionary. So we're going to do session logged in equals true, and you can actually add your own stuff to this dictionary. So that's why I like session. You can basically save anything to the session, and the session again is like a cookie, so you can save all kinds of neat information to this session. And then so session logged in equals true, and then we're also going to set this user session's username. We want this username to equal whatever the username actually was at the time. And then we are going to return the redirect, and then URL underscore for. And normally we would do the URL for that intro.py page, but it doesn't exist. So we're just, for now, we'll return them to the dashboard until we have that intro page. I'm not really, probably in this tutorial I won't add it, but maybe we will just for kicks or something, but probably not. So we do that. Otherwise, outside of this else statement, we have, or outside of this else right here, we still have this if way up there, and if that runs, great, we've done a lot of cool stuff. Otherwise, really nothing has happened. So we just want to, let me make sure I get this right. So we've got try if, scrolling down. Okay. If nothing else runs, we'll just return render template, and the template we want to render is register.html. The parameter, one of the variables rather that we want to pass through, is going to be form. And again, we're using the scripting, or the line-by-line nature of Python to basically, we're using that as a form of logic here. We run this if statement. If this if statement runs, we either render the template here or we render the template here, period. Otherwise, we will pass along and we'll render this template. Okay, so that's how we're kind of getting away with that. And we also return the string E here if that happens to fail, which is very messy. Returning straight up string E is a bad idea. You should return something that looks a little better than that. But hopefully you're not hitting that string E, and eventually you would actually want to hide that error. Again, we put them there for debugging purposes, but once you're done debugging, take those errors out, because the only reason people should be seeing those errors is if they're up to no good. So you don't want to always leave those. So that should be it for our register page. We might have some typos here, but we'll end up finding them soon enough. Now, I believe the only major thing left is to actually create the register HTML page. So we'll probably do that in the next video, and then we really will have a full registration process. And then in the video after that, I'm going to show you guys this password hashing, because it's important that you understand what's going on there. That way, if you choose to do it your own way or something stupid like that, you can understand how password hashing ought to work. So anyways, stay tuned for those two things. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. I don't really expect too many other questions anyways, because you won't really know if this works or not until the next video. So anyway, but if you do have them, questions or comments, leave them below. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support and the subscriptions, and until next time.